Hello, my name is Erik Johansson. I come from Housing Development and Management from the Department of Architecture and Built Environment. And I will make an introduction to the topic of sustainable cities. Sustainable cities is, of course, a very wide field, so I will just be able to cover a small part of this field. However, there are a number of problems we have in urban areas. One is the high energy use, and this of course has consequences for lots of things. It will create more air pollution. It will also create more emissions of greenhouse gases. We also have the problem with the urban heat island, the fact that cities are warmer than the surrounding countryside. Urban sprawl is another big problem in cities. The fact that cities are growing horizontally with low-rise, low-density development, which creates very long distances within cities. Another problem is the lack of adequate housing. Of the urban population today, an estimated 1/3 live in substandard housing. In so-called slum areas, of course, especially then in developing countries. This is a major problem, etc. The list can be enormous here, but I will stick to this in this presentation. We are also exposed worldwide for the global warming, and we are expecting an increase of temperature the coming years. Depending on different scenarios here, we will end up in a considerable increase in temperature. That will of course put a lot of stress on people, especially in warm climates. Heat waves will be more common and they will occur more frequently. We will have sea level rise as another consequence of global warming, which is of course a problem especially in coastal areas. Again, the poor population in developing countries which often live near riverbeds and seas are especially vulnerable. We will have more extreme weather events in general, more cyclones, more storms, heavier rainfall, flooding, etc. In urban areas, we are also exposed to the urbanization, the fact that especially the urban population is growing. The rural population is not expected to rise much in the future, but the urban population is continuing to rise. And since a few years, we are more urban. The urban population is bigger than the rural population. And this puts, of course, stress on the urban development in the cities. More houses has to be built, and this is also one reason why cities tend to grow in a horizontal way as urban sprawl, and especially common then in developing countries. So how can we create sustainable cities? I will take up some key issues here. One important aspect is the land use and the density issue. Another aspect is public transport, very important for creating sustainable cities. Walkability, cyclability, and connectivity of cities are important to make cities that are good for, let's say, outdoor activities and to connect different parts of the cities. Urban greenery is another very important aspect. The access to green area, biological diversity, etc., that comes with urban greenery. And another important aspect is the microclimate. to create a favorable microclimate is important. And all these issues have to be treated at the same time and in the same space. So this is one of the challenges is for sustainable cities. If we look at the density issue and start with looking at low-rise and low-density urban areas, these areas they have some advantages. They are less noisy, they have less pollution, and they are more green than other areas. They also have a rather small heat island, so there are several positive aspects, but there are also many disadvantages, and especially then that they require expensive infrastructure. The transport is very inefficient and then also becomes expensive, and there are normally poor access to services. The other extreme, then high-rise and high-density urban areas, they have on the contrary, they are more efficient when it comes to land use. You can have a more efficient infrastructure because of the shorter distances, and also less transport or shorter transport distances, which also is efficient. However, if you look especially on the extremely high-rise and high-density areas, they have also a number of disadvantages. We can have infrastructure overload, congestion due to too many vehicles, for example. The buildings are normally expensive, especially if you look at very high-rise skyscrapers. More sophisticated technology is needed to build them. Pollution is normally higher in dense areas, and the urban heat island is larger, which is then a problem mainly in warm countries. If we look at the relationship between density and urban transport, there is a very clear relationship between the energy use per person for public transport and the density of the city. So low density cities are common, for example, in North America, normally have a very high energy use per person for public transport, whereas the other extreme would be more high density cities of Asia have a much lower energy use per person for transport. So here is a very clear link. We can compare two cities as an example. The city of Barcelona in Spain, which is a fairly dense city, and Atlanta in the United States, which is a very dispersed city with where the suburbs are characterized by very low-rise development and low-density development. And if we look at the density, Barcelona has more than 10 times the population density of Atlanta, and it also shows in the use of public transport, where in Barcelona around 30% use public transport, and in Atlanta only 5%. And on top of that, a lot of people in Barcelona also walk, so due to the short distances. Another example of successful public transport is the city of Curitiba in Brazil. Here they have a well-developed system with separate bus lanes, which makes the public transport very effective and efficient, keeping time, etc., and can transport a lot of people in a well developed system for the whole system with different types of buses, fast buses, slower buses, etc. And also the urban structure of the city is interesting in the sense that the density is higher near the bus lanes, so more people have a short distance to reach public transport. I mentioned the urban heat island, and this comes from the fact that urban areas absorb radiation and store this heat, which has the effect that urban areas become warmer, especially during the night. And on average, the urban heat island is maybe between 1 and 3 degrees. But normally, the bigger the city, the more dense the city, the higher the urban heat island. The urban design is also very important for the thermal environment in the cities. If we have a poor urban design with lots of open spaces like wide streets, wide public space, etc., and if we don't have shade, this creates well, first of all, it's a very inefficient use of land, but it also has several consequences on the thermal environment. It creates increased heat stress, which in turn leads to that we spend more time indoors and less social contacts. And it also has the consequences for the energy use of buildings. We will have increased use of air conditioning for buildings that are exposed to solar radiation and are not protected by, for example, vegetation or other ways of shading. Another aspect of cities is the issue of walking and cycling, and we need to create attractive cities where it is which encourage the walking and bicycling. So we need to have aesthetically attractive cities, and of course well planned when it comes to bicycle paths, etc. And we need to have good connectivity between neighborhoods, and this is often not the case because due to the intensive use of car traffic, neighborhoods are often separated by huge traffic roads. When it comes to vegetation, this is of course very important, and there are many advantages of using vegetation. One thing is the rainwater absorption, which is of course important to avoid problems with flooding, which is an increasing problem. We have the biological diversity, which is also important, and vegetation is also generally good for well-being and has proved to reduce the stress of people. If we look at in warm climates, the vegetation has the advantage of creating shade, which is very important to lower the temperatures of the ground and facades of buildings, which creates, let's say, a cooler environment around the people in the city, and will also lead to less need for cooling of buildings. So to finish up this introduction, I will just mention what some of the challenges we have for the future. For the future of urban areas. One is to create an adequate density, and I think not a low-rise, low density is too inefficient and too expensive, but also an extremely high density creates problems. So somewhere in between, some kind of medium rise would be the ideal, but how exactly this looks is of course depending from one city to another, depending on the climate, on the cultural context, etc. We need to maximize the use of vegetation, especially important if we make cities more dense. So this has to be planned in a good way to provide parks, shading trees, green roofs, permeable ground, etc. We need to encourage public transport and bicycle paths in cities, and that also includes often normally the discouragement also of car traffic. We need to have energy efficient buildings. This is very important since the buildings are one of the major, where we have the major energy use independent of climate in the world. So this is very important. And also important finally to encourage outdoor activities by creating aesthetically attractive environments and to create a favorable microclimate for people to live in, etc. These are just a few, of course, of the challenges we have. And to achieve this, we need to have proper planning and design of urban areas and landscapes. So these are extremely important for the future urban development, urban planning and urban design. Okay, thank you very much.